He was determined to disclose what everybody knows. And when I think a little bit about the lyric, is that we all know certain truths, we all know certain things, but we sometimes don't talk about them. They're either too painful or hard to address some of the issues that face us as a society. So he was determined to disclose what everybody knows, but it's just that it's never really talked about. And I think that we as Aboriginal people, in fact, have become an unconscious civilization to a degree and in a way, thanks to residential school, thanks to the Indian Act, thanks to the general marginalization. We have been removed from the natural processes of society that would have normally shaped any society. It doesn't matter what your nationality is, doesn't matter what your beliefs are, doesn't matter what your values are. We have been removed from the natural dynamic of humanity, from the systems of society, of evolution and of growth. And that is what has happened to us. And I often we always talk about our culture. We talk about our cultures. And when we talk about that, we're really talking mostly about our ethnic cultures. But I want to talk about our corporate culture. And where we have naturally gravitated to is a corporate culture that has been shaped by the Indian Act, that has been shaped by residential schools and by general marginalization. And the corporate culture, one of the features, for example, I note, is that in any business, in any society, there's an element of risk. Every company I work for, every project has an element of risk. I work with a lot of First Nations from BC, Saskatchewan, right across the country, Quebec, and I find that some of our communities, not all, are completely risk adverse. That we will not take the first step towards any risk at all. It has to be free, it has to be easy, and it has to be safe. That is a corporate cultural attribute that we have to change if we're going to progress, if we're going to advance in business. And this is all about being an entrepreneur. There is no such thing as advancing or growing or being an entrepreneur or developing business capacities without taking a risk. It has to be an informed risk. It has to be a risk that you have maximized the mitigation possibilities of the project. But risk is like breathing in business. There is always a risk. There's a risk for Brookfield. There's a risk for every company that takes on any kind of a project. And we must begin to change our corporate culture, not our heritage culture, not our nationality culture, our ethnic culture. It is the way that the Indian Act shaped us over 100 years. We now must undo that. We talk about colonization. We use these terms very shallow. We talk about genocide. We talk about colonization. What are we really talking about? Well, learning to accept risk is about uncolonizing. Because in our natural environment, all nationalities have to accept some measure of risk. But above everything, we need an economy. An economy drives everything. I see that we focus so much on rights because rights are very much intertwined. I don't see where we're focusing the same amount on economic development and a large-scale and small-scale community business planning. When I think about us going forward as a community, I think we need more community planning. Not politics, more community planning. What is available in a particular community? What is the potential? Hire the talent, bring the talent in. And I want to say something about our First Nations communities. This is something that's talked about in the mainstream. I spoke to the C.D. Howe Institute. Everybody talks about the same thing. If you lived in a country where 50% of your citizens left, would that country be viable? If 50% of the population of Canada left, of America left, if they left that country, what would that say about the country? Now, our First Nations communities, we know that about 50%, 48, some will say 48, 50, depends who you read, it doesn't matter, leave our communities because we don't believe the quality of life is there. We're voting with our feet. Going forward, I think we have to develop community planning. I think we have to focus on economic development far more than we have, far more on education. We need to attract people back to the communities. There's a lot of talented, smart people, but somehow some communities are threatened by the talented, smart people, and they don't invite them back. How do you develop capacity unless it's not just the bodies, but the brain power that's needed in there?